The alleged Florida State shooter is out of the hospital and now set to face the law. This is his newly released mugshot by the Leon County Sheriff. This is Phoenix Ikner making his first court appearance this morning in North Florida. He appeared in court through a video feed. His mugshot shows his jaw damaged after he was shot by police. They say they did that because he didn't follow their orders after he allegedly committed a deadly mass shooting on his college campus. We have newly released court documents shedding new light on what police say happened and how Ikner allegedly chased down his victims. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Before we get into this case, I do want to tell you about our new podcast that just dropped on Wondery Plus. It's Karen the Retrial, and let me tell you, it is the best place for a recap of the Karen Reed case, everything going on in her retrial, which is literally happening right now, and what's to come as this new trial heats up. You can find Karen the Retrial exclusively on the Wondery app or in Apple Podcasts. Click on the link in our description to listen now. Okay, let's get into this case today involving the alleged Florida State shooter. This is information that we have been waiting for since that shooter was taken into custody in the hours after shots were fired on the Florida State campus. This is the mugshot that the sheriff posted on social media of 20-year-old Phoenix Ikner, and you can see what being shot in the jaw did to his face. Ikner had been in a Tallahassee hospital since the shooting on April 17th. And here is Ikner making his first court appearance today. He did so virtually. He's being held in a neighboring county to the one that Tallahassee is in. Now, our cameras, the judge, prosecution, and defense, they were all still in Leon County where this case will be tried. But the Leon County Sheriff said that Ikner is being held in the neighboring county because of his connections to law enforcement in the county where this shooting happened. The shooter's stepmom is a Leon County Sheriff's deputy. She's worked for the agency for nearly 20 years. Last March, she was Employee of the Month for LCSO. The sheriff's office says Deputy Jessica Ikner took personal leave in the wake of the news about her stepson. She's most recently been a school resource officer at a middle school, according to local media. Phoenix Ikner is now officially facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder for what he allegedly did on the FSU campus nearly a month ago. I'll get more into what happened in court today and where the legal part of this case could go next, but I have to tell you the details that we've learned in new court documents that have just been released. This is the probable cause affidavit that we just received out of Leon County, Florida. It lays out what police say Ikner did when he allegedly started his attack just before noon on April 17th near the FSU Student Union. The document says that when police arrived, they heard gunshots and then they encounter a suspect who they describe as a white male wearing a garnet shirt and shorts who is in a, quote, shooting stance. As police got into position to engage the suspect was shooting at someone who was running away. And that is when police say they shot Phoenix Ikner. That gunshot was to the jaw. Here's the mugshot. Once again, you can see the right side of his face and the damage left by that bullet. The gun that he was using, according to police, was a .45 caliber Glock, which they recovered. That gun belonged to his LCSO deputy stepmom, according to the Leon County Sheriff. According to documents, deputies found shell casings around the student union, and they also found a vehicle, a Hummer, that was registered to Ikner's father, and in plain view inside the vehicle was a shotgun. Police seem to have a lot of evidence in this case, specifically security footage and cell phone video of Ikner allegedly carrying out this attack. Police say that Ikner pointed that shotgun at someone, but it jammed. So he put the gun back in the Hummer, then pulled out a handgun and allegedly started shooting at another victim. These court documents go into detail of how Phoenix Ikner allegedly targeted people on the Florida State campus. The victims in these court documents are only identified by their initials. Ikner is accused of killing 2 men. Neither of them were Florida State students. One was Taru Chaba. He was a father of 2 who worked as a food vendor. He was visiting the FSU campus the day that Ikner allegedly unleashed this attack. And the other victim was Robert Morales. He was also a dad, and he worked on the FSU campus in dining services. Court records say that Ikner is seen on surveillance camera chasing a victim out of the student union. That victim identified as TC, believed to be Chaba. The document says that Ikner shot TC, which put him on the ground. Ikner then runs around the area and returns to TC, who is laying on the ground, and shoots him again. Ikner is also allegedly seen on surveillance video walking up behind a victim named RM that is believed to be Morales. Ikner allegedly shoots him in the back and kills him. He then moves on to another victim who he chases, according to these court documents. Hey, by the way, many of the stories that we cover prove that life is unpredictable and having a great attorney matters, and that's where our partners at Morgan & Morgan come in. This is a law firm with more than 1,000 attorneys and a history of winning. Just in the past couple of months, they were able to secure a $9.3 million verdict. That was for a car crash victim in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for a car accident victim in Atlanta, and $1.8 million in Kentucky. And in that case, the insurance company was only going to offer $5,000. Now, even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you've been injured, it is so easy to file a claim. Go to forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also click the link in the description of this video or scan the QR code on your screen. The documents also say that Ikner identified himself to responding members of law enforcement, so it was quickly learned who the alleged attacker was and the shocking connection that he had to the local sheriff's office. These new court records lay out a terrifying scene of a shooter chasing people down who, to this point, we don't believe he had a previous connection to. We don't know a motive for the attack at this point. It is unclear when we will know that. Ikner, according to police, invoked his right not to cooperate with the investigation, and he did so immediately as he was taken into custody. We do know that Ikner allegedly had extremist political views, to the point that some of his classmates have told media outlets that when this shooting happened, they were shocked to see that it happened, but not surprised that he was the one who was arrested for it. We know that Ikner wasn't just a deputy's stepson, but he was involved to some extent with the agency as a member of a youth advisory council when he was in high school. We have the 15-page document from 2021 when he applied to join the group that is supposed to work as a bridge between law enforcement and local youth. In the application, Ikner is asked why he wants to become a member of the group, and he says, quote, "I can try and help Tallahassee become one of the best places for teenagers to live, grow up, and plant family roots." The application also asks him about an issue of importance in the country, to which he replies, race relations. He says, quote, "I am passionate about this issue because it's a driven factor in the political landscape today. For example, at my school, there is a clash between the races and that each race feels the opposite race is ignorant. There is no communication or dialogue between them. I believe that race sensitivity should go both ways. We don't need to focus on one race being better or need different treatment than another. This breeds issues within the classrooms at my school and adds fuel to the fire. I think that the Youth Advisory Council could help bridge this gap/issue." In the application, Ikner also writes a biography claiming, quote, "I have been through more than most people." We know that Ikner was in the middle of a years-long custody dispute between his biological mom and dad when he was a kid. This is a picture of the shooter's biological mom. Her name? Anne-Marie Erickson. This is a picture of her from an unrelated case in 2013. We found this 2015 lawsuit that was filed by Phoenix's biological mom, and we went through dozens of pages of court documents that detail a tumultuous divorce and custody battle involving the alleged shooter when they were young. Now, the other name listed as a plaintiff in this document is Christian Gunnar Erickson. It's been reported the alleged shooter changed his name to Phoenix Ikner from Christian Erickson in 2020 to have a name associated with his biological dad's family, Christopher Ikner, who is married to the LCSO deputy that the sheriff named. The shooter's biological mom claimed in the lawsuit that Phoenix was the victim of psychological and emotional abuse from the time he was 11 years old. That suit demanded damages would go into a college fund for the minor who would grow up to be the FSU shooting suspect named Phoenix Ikner. According to Leon County court records, the case was eventually dismissed. We found this document filed in Leon County that shows in 2016, the shooter's mom was convicted of a charge of removing a minor from the state and failure to return a minor. Erickson spent 30 days in prison. she was put on 2 years probation. Erickson also recently posted this on Facebook ahead of the shooting, writing, quote, "Love being my son, Christian Gunner, in parentheses, Phoenix mother." In that youth group application, Phoenix writes about growing up splitting time between his biological parents, who would hand him over at a local police station. He also talks about an incident when he was 10 years old and had to split his spring break between his dad and his mom. The first half he spent with his dad, then the second half with his mom. He says he was told for the second half he was going to Disney, but then he was on a plane with his mom and they flew to Norway and stayed there for 103 days. You remember that case she was convicted of removing a minor without permission. Now eventually this became a legal issue and he says he was given back to his biological dad in Norway and brought back to the US. His mom, again, charged in that case. Ikner talks about needing counseling after that. He then says he joined his school's JROTC and he had plans to join the Air Force after high school and to become a history teacher. Ikner didn't join the military after high school, but eventually he would enroll at Florida State, where he would eventually become an alleged school shooter and killer. Today in court, the judge ruled that Ikner be held with no bond. His attorneys were court appointed, no plea was entered. The judge also ruled that Ikner cannot have contact with the family members of the 2 men he allegedly killed and the other victims in this case. Joining us now to talk more about this case is retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt. Thank you as always for joining us here on Law and Crime. I first want to start with this mugshot that came out last night. You can see his jaw from being shot there by police because he allegedly didn't follow orders when they told him to put his gun down. What stood out to you when you looked at it?
Well, it just kind of the intensity on his face, as well as just the injury as well. It just by you can't tell a book by its cover, but based upon that photo, there's definitely something going on behind those eyes, and it's just an absolute travesty that people had to lose their lives because of the mental health issues of this shooter.
He's going to face 2 counts of murder in the first degree and believe it's 7 counts of attempted murder. So he's facing a judge today, making his first court appearance. So now the legal part of this is going to play out. But for the people who are investigating what happened on FSU's campus, what happens now for them as now he's out of the hospital and he's in custody and the case is moving forward?
Well, they're going to continue to monitor his communications from jail unless it's with his attorney, and they're going to monitor who's coming to see him. There's always a very small chance, but there's always a attention to whether he got assistance to do this, because certainly they want to bring everybody to justice. And then they're going to continue to follow up on witnesses, follow up on the forensic evidence, and basically wrap up an airtight case.
And it's interesting you say airtight, because I always look at this and I see, presuming that he'll plead not guilty to the charges as the case goes forward. But at the very least, there's going to be body camera video from officers in that moment telling him to put his gun down. We haven't seen that yet, but there's going to be a lot of evidence proving that Phoenix Ikner was the person who opened fire, who took 2 lives, shot several other people on the campus of Florida State. What could go wrong in this case for the prosecutors and for law enforcement?
Well, the evidence is overwhelming. The only hope he would have, so to speak, would be if there's some sort of process issue in terms of his due process rights. But based upon the fact that there doesn't appear to be any warrants or any other legal process, that basically they reacted to his behavior and they went ahead and gathered all the evidence, the witness statements. It doesn't appear that there is much that could go wrong on this case, but anything is possible.
Unfortunately, we've had too many examples of mass shootings and too many examples of people who are accused and those who do commit these mass shootings. When you look at Phoenix Ikner, from the experience you've had in your career, what stands out to you?
Well, the access to firearms, the access to law enforcement training, and then the extremist views that apparently he was expressing throughout for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's not necessarily, this isn't a right-wing or left-wing issue. This is a mental health issue, because obviously he took whatever views he had, and basically that rolled into wanting to commit violence on other innocent human beings.
How consistent is that? And that might be a leading question, but it seems to be consistent with Other cases we've seen of shooters where after the fact, you have people who come forward who say that this person said things that made me feel uncomfortable. Um, how does Phoenix Ikner compare to some of those other situations?
Well, the Secret Service did a study, I believe it was right after Columbine, and then it's been ongoing, studying mass shooters and these mass casualty events. And one theme of their study is that there were signs that this person was prone to violence, and that the signs were apparent to people around them. And that's why they were, for a very long time, and I think they still do, push, if you see something, say something. So in the case of this individual, the fact that he was espousing these extremist views and had access to firearms, A plus B equals C. It doesn't mean that everybody that has a firearm would do something like this or has extremist views, but there's probably, once they dig a little deeper, he may have expressed interest in violence or doing harm on other people.
It seems like a lot of times when we talk about see something, say something, it's after the fact, and it's the hope that someone had said something or there was some way that we could have intervened prior to something like what happened on Florida State's campus from happening. But now we have times in college. I mean, people, they want them to speak freely in class, to speak their mind. I mean, how do you draw the line between this was someone who was really into his politics, really into his viewpoints? They might have been aggressive, but it's freedom of speech, to then recognizing that this is someone who could allegedly open fire and kill people on the campus?
Well, you never want to discriminate against a viewpoint, especially on a college campus. I think the missing piece was, did he express an interest in violence? And was he involved in violent activities? Was he going to shooting ranges quite a bit? And those statements, I mean, if somebody once said, if somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And what would an intervention with him made a difference? So that's also been Secret Service did studies. If somebody really wants to do harm on another person, the only thing that's going to stop them sometimes is incarceration. So in this case, there likely was signs. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on, especially now. But the bottom line is, this stuff has to stop, and there's a mental health crisis in our country, and there needs to be put some resources to this to quell these crazy mass casualty events.
Yeah, and certainly this one raising a lot of questions also because Phoenix Ikner's stepmom, a longtime member of the Leon County Sheriff's Office, seemed like he was very experienced, at least in certain parts of the Sheriff's Office. He was part of a youth advisory council. What stands out to you, or questions you would have if you were investigating this case, knowing that he had that type of connection to law enforcement?
Well, I'm going to interview everybody around him to see if he had made statements that were indicative of violence. And then at that point, there might be some people that are held accountable because they ignored some statements that he may have said that were indicative of a mass casualty event or doing something violent. And then just trying to understand or do a profile of him from a psychological perspective, and then learn from this and find out, okay, what were the things that were missed, and then make sure even in the university environment, okay, make sure the assistance is available for people that are having a mental health crisis to avoid something like this.
Because I think on the surface, at least for me, when I heard from the sheriff that he was a member of a youth advisory council that's supposed to bridge the gap between the youth in the Florida Panhandle and Tallahassee area and law enforcement, it just sounds like this is the type of person that I guess would be on the right path. But the fact that he was associated with law enforcement, would that raise some questions for you as far as potentially being suspicious that he had that type of interest?
Well, I think I would actually look at who he interacted with or who he counseled on this youth panel to make sure none of them have been brought in or radicalized based upon the things that he was saying. So that's because obviously youth or young people, especially young men, are very, very impressionable. So there might have to be some counter programming put forth to these individuals, these kids that he had interactions with, to hopefully to prevent something like this happening again.
He's 20 years old. That seems to be kind of that late adolescence. I mean, he's an adult past the age of 18, but it seems like that's the age where we've seen a lot of these types of cases where a shooter has the extremist views and then they commit something like he's accused of committing. What is it about that age that just seems to
Well,
be, that age that where these things happen.
I mean, that can be considered late adolescence because, males don't mature as quickly as females, and they're going through a bit of a transition in their life. And then they also have such a monstrous access to social media that it's very easily to radicalize these kids, these males, because they're looking for purpose. And once they find that purpose, whatever it might be, then they'll go ahead and pursue that purpose. But in what as a parent myself, what I'm hoping and I'm planning on guaranteeing is my kids, they find their purpose is a positive thing or a positive purpose on society, not something like this.
He had a rough childhood. We've learned at least like custody situations between his biological mom and then his stepmom and his biological dad on that side of the family. Um, Presumably the defense, if this ends up going to trial, may argue that that was the reason all of this happened. This was a victim of bad circumstance growing up. How is that an argument that could actually hold some water based on what you've seen in the past of shooters like this, where they come from a bad environment? And is that something almost as an excuse that the defense could make for what happened?
Well, the defense, their job is to defend their client and to use whatever tools they have at their disposal to make sure to make sure it's a fair trial and justice is served. The mental health defense, even though a lot of people, a lot in the media that seems to get this impression that it's effective, it's very rarely rarely effective, especially in cases like mass casualty events like this, because simply there is a societal pressure to make sure there's justice being done for all those victims. And so to use the mental health defense like Reagan's shooter Hinckley did
Yeah.
back then, I think it was more common and more effective 40 years ago, but now it doesn't really hold a whole lot of water.
Because someone who would do something like this is not mentally in the mind of what you would consider a normal person to be. But what's typically the bar? And even as an investigator, the bar you're looking for to say that this is a person who is mentally unwell to the point that that could be a defense for them, or someone who just had extremist viewpoints, they acted on it, and then now they're accused of murder.
Well, in I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so but the legal standard is basically they need to understand what they were doing. You know that it wasn't voices or it wasn't some other entity that was motivating. They need to have an understanding of their intent. And in this case, he likely did things before that showed what his intent was and his understanding of what he was doing, and then he followed through on that process.
And then his mom, that was apparently her gun that he used allegedly in this shooting. We've seen in other mass shooting cases in Winder, Georgia, a father charged because his son allegedly committed a mass shooting. The Crumbly case in Michigan, the parents were in trouble for giving access to their child who committed a mass shooting. But as an adult, is Phoenix Ikner still in a place? Is his stepmom in a place where she could be in trouble because it was her gun that was used?
Absolutely. I mean, there's criminal negligence. As a retired law enforcement officer, I do have firearms, and I keep them locked up. My kids don't have access to those firearms, and they don't have access to the combinations of where they're being stored, nor do they even know where they're at. So that could be a significant issue of of criminal liability for his stepmom or anybody else that had given him access to firearms.
He is not cooperating, at least from what we know, with law enforcement. He invoked his right to speak to an attorney and not cooperate almost within hours of this happening. But if you're the prosecution, if you're the investigator in this case, do you need him to cooperate if you have all of this evidence to get a conviction and to put him away?
No, I mean, you always want cooperation because you want to avoid a trial because then you don't want to put the victims through the turmoil of having to sit on the stand and reliving the experience. And that really is the most important part of this process when you have a case of overwhelming evidence like this. But to your question, no, you don't need his cooperation. You have multiple witness statements. You have the firearm that was used. You have video, body cam video. You have video of the site of him walking around. and you likely are going to have spontaneous utterances from him right when he was arrested, which are going to come out on body cam video.
Yeah, and we'll see how this case moves forward. We had been waiting for him to be released from the hospital, and now he is in the custody of law enforcement. We'll see where everything goes from here. Retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt, is always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.